I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. Tired of the madness, done with the sadness. Gonna break free and be unleashed.
Hello, I'm Deidre Beecham, Visibility Catalyst and Recovering Nice Girl.
And I'm Jenny Badig, the Inner Space Engineer, and welcome to Unleashed AF, the podcast where we help you own your greatness and unleash your authentic self.
Yes, which is so needed, so needed. We need to do that. Today, our topic is the leash of Christian nationalism, because it is not just about religion.
Or just about Christ.
Yeah, definitely. Before we dive in a little bit about each of us, just a little bit more, I work with soulful women to break free from nice girl training, step into their power voice, and live life on their own terms.
And drawing on my background as a human factors engineer and a hypnotherapist, I help rewire your mindset so you can unlock your true potential.
Awesome. And, if you're enjoying our shows, of course, like, share, follow, subscribe, drop your thoughts, questions, chat in the comments. We had a great comment last week, but I'm getting off track because I'm a little distracted by something that has just happened in our local legislature. But Jenny, go ahead and take the rest of this beginning part, and then I'll jump into what just recently happened here.
The glance back?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah.
So last week we talked about the patriarchy and how that creates leashes in terms of what we feel like we're capable of doing. We did have a great comment on our video from one of our listeners that we're looking into and plan on kind of devote a future episode to talking about that comment and what can come out of it. Definitely it was something that caused us to reflect kind of.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. So we really appreciated it. And I didn't have an answer, so I'm looking forward to doing the research on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll dive deeper into that in a future episode. Stay tuned.
So before we jump into Christian nationalism, I want to talk about what is happening right now in the North Carolina legislature. I think it was just a couple of days ago, but they were holding, everybody was in the Capitol, and there were viewers watching, our government in action. And they started talking about the hurricane relief bill. And the Democrats were upset because the Republicans added a whole bunch of pork. Is that what you called it? Pork. Mm-hmm. So they added pieces of legislation into this bill, the hurricane relief bill, that is all about stripping the incoming governor of all his power. He'd have zero power to do anything. In fact, before he's allowed to make a decision, everything has to be passed by the Republican-held, and he's not allowed to do any vetoes. I mean, all of his power is stripped away. Now, as they were bickering back and forth, because the Democrats were very upset that this was added to something that's supposed to be helping people, the Mark Robinson, he's a horrible person. He kicks everybody out. He kicks all of the people that were there to view, the public there to view, kicked them out, and then did the vote. The Republicans do have a majority, and it went right down party lines, where all the Republicans voted for the hurricane relief bill, which is very woefully named at this point because it also strips the governor, the incoming governor, of all of his power. And and the Democrats voted against it, and the Republicans voted for it. So the danger now that has passed, yes, it's dangerous that the governor doesn't have power. That's just a tiny part of this.
Right.
To me, what is so much more important is that, and you had mentioned it, Jenny, is that
Mhm.
um, if this stands, if we don't fight this right now in North Carolina or anybody else that wants to come to our help, because this is all of our problem right now, that if this is allowed to stand, we both know how little there's so many people actually pay attention to the underlying, when we say go do your research, most people don't
Mhm.
go do their research.
Right.
And so with this being passed, Republicans can say, look, the Democrats don't care about you. Every single one of them voted against this bill. Every single one of them. And and then the Democrats would go, look, they at the last minute they added this a strip, and and then it's a he said, she said. Democrats
Right.
like horrible, inhumane people, which is what we're being made out to be anyway. And so it's very, very dangerous. And fortunately, Reverend Barber is organizing a walk to Capitol. Raleigh is the state capital here, North Carolina, to go to the state capitol and do a sit-in when they go into session. We don't have a time yet because they haven't released what time they'll be in session on Wednesday. But we're going to go to the Capitol, and we invite anybody to participate with us. The more we fight against this happening right now, the more we can potentially stop this whole thing. To me, I think this is a big watershed moment. And I don't think I'm being fantastical in thinking that.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be a watershed moment. I mean, it could be the moment where we show up and we go, look how powerful we are. We're not letting you do this. We're not letting you bamboozle the public. We're not allowing you to start a civil war. Turn this over, strip the pork off this thing, and give the people some support because they're sleeping in tents and it's 15, 20 degrees outside at night in the mountains right now.
Mhm. Yeah, and I do wanna just correct one thing that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So pork is something that gets added to bills sometimes, but I guess that's specifically about funding certain programs. So this was actually considered a rider. I looked it
Okay,
up,
thank
and it
you.
could be a rider to that bill, which
Thank you
happens.
very much.
I also looked up, and it happens almost all the time in bills that are pushed through with some kind of significant, like, oh, it's a must pass bill. You must vote for this. They always add shit to try to sneak it through that they know wouldn't pass on its own. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's only one side that does it, but this
Of course
happens
not.
a
Oh, no,
lot
no, no.
in our government.
But this is particularly dangerous
Yeah.
right now
But
because
it's
of the
also something to keep in
implications.
mind in general when you hear one side blame the other about, well, you didn't even vote for this. Chances are there was something else in that bill that they didn't want to approve. And that's why they didn't vote for it. It doesn't mean, because I don't know anybody in the government that wouldn't want to give hurricane relief to people in North Carolina,
Right?
right?
It's
Like, that's
it's
not what
just
it's about.
mind-boggling, but,
Right.
evidently the Democrats control the weather, so
Right. Yeah. They created that storm.
so, anyway, thank
Yeah.
you for, allowing me to take a few moments at the beginning of this. It was so passionate about this right now because it is an opportunity for us to rise up and move things in the right direction. And if you can't make it, at least, send powerful thoughts,
Yeah.
talk
Or
about it.
share about it, like, talk
Yeah,
about it
share
on
about it.
social media so other people know about it. We can spread that's one thing that I think is significantly different about this time in our history versus, let's say, when Hitler came into control. They didn't have social media where everybody could share with each other what was going on when they started to see things like, that doesn't seem quite right.
Well, I
Because
think
he
that's
didn't.
why I think that's why the Koreans have had so much enforce going out. People are saying, "Well, Americans don't do that." You don't know that, okay? And don't put that on people.
Mhm,
We know what's happening.
mhm,
I think it's a very small portion of people that want the end of democracy.
mhm.
It may be widespread, but I don't think it's nearly as many people as you think. They just get a lot of airtime.
Yeah.
and they're loud. There are a lot of churches that don't want this. There are a lot of people that are religious that don't want this. There are a lot of very wonderful people in this world that don't want this. And I truly believe we're the majority, and we need to stand up to fight so that they can see you're not going to be
Right.
able to do this in America.
Right. And I think there's a ton of people who may support the things they see happening, but not realizing what it can really be or lead to. They don't
Right.
understand. They think they're voting for democracy.
Yeah.
And it's not the case. I mean, Hitler was voted in. It wasn't like he took control by force.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we've seen before, and now I regret deleting that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
This would work perfectly right now. I had uploaded a video about this woman who was comparing the events that are happening right now and have been happening over the last several years, but in particular the last 8 years. The things that have been happening and the things that are foreshadowed to happen right now, given Trump coming into office and now saying, "Oh yeah, it was about Project 2025," and now renaming it the American Dream or something. Or America First, or they renamed it America something, or the American Dream. I don't know, but they renamed it, and so all of that is happening. But we can. I truly believe we can stop it. Oh, I know. I was comparing it to I'm sorry. It was the woman. It was the woman with the video that you go.
Well, she was pointing out the consistencies, the similarities between today and when Hitler was, doing his thing.
Yeah, the things that are happening right now that they compare, they fall right in line with. It's almost like a playbook having taken out of Mein Kampf and Hitler's playbook about how to take over this country. Yeah. So, but we can change it. I mean, look at what happened to Korea. Look what's happening in Georgia. People are fighting, and it's going to take us standing up for democracy too. And this is just for, what? We'd have to just talk about this right now because I can't think of the other stuff. So it's so interesting. I used to just think, and I know this is a fallacy now, I used to just think that, and I apologize to my co-host here who has no idea where I'm going.
Just along the ride. So, hanging on to your cape.
Hang with me, Jenny. So, so the interesting thing is that, and I just lost it again. So why don't we just do this? I'm so sorry. I had this great idea, and apologizing to Jenny just took me off track. And
don't worry about it.
So much editing on this thing. I mean, my gosh. Okay, so we're going to Christian nationalism.
Yes.
So first we should define Christian nationalism, since I've been talking for a whole lot and have just screwed the show. So you want to go ahead and tell us what Christian nationalism is?
So Christian nationalism is a form of religious nationalism that focuses on promoting the Christian views of its followers in order to achieve prominence or dominance in political and social life. And so part of the thing that's interesting about that definition to me is it points out that it's just a form of religious nationalism. Another form of religious nationalism, like ISIS, is a form of Muslim nationalism. So it's so interesting that, I mean, you could have someone draw the similarities between the types of rhetoric that Christians in the US are using about, trying to get rid of anybody that's coming into our border, crossing our borders because they're murderers and all this other stuff. You could compare that to, on the Muslim or Islamic side, talking about infidels that deserve to be, killed or whatever. So it's different verbiage, but as long as it matches your reality, you don't realize that it's kind of the same thing.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
um,
and go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, that's all right. You
And
go.
so, one of the things that you wonder is, well, how? How does it happen?
Mm-hmm.
And um we have a little chart right here that talks about the 7 aspects of society that um Christian nationalism, or whoever is in charge of church, or whoever wants to make that happen, the driving
Mm-hmm.
forces, the power behind it, that they want to get into 7 aspects of society, which is government, business, arts and entertainment, media, education, religion, and family. Pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
Not a
much
whole lot left
everything.
if you take all that away.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
And one thing that I noticed in some of the documentaries that I've watched um, in the recent-ish history, uh, you know, and even things I've seen on social media and stuff that have kind of led me to documentaries, people today kind of assume that things the way they are now have always been that way, or that's how the country was intended, from its origin to be. And it's just not true. One example of that is "In God We Trust" was not included in money until like the 1950s.
Mhm.
That's less than a century ago.
Yeah.
And this country's been around for a couple of centuries now. So that definitely was not part of, from the get-go, why the country was created.
Yeah, and
Um,
I know I love when somebody says, "Look, it says it right on our money. We are a Christian nation." I'm like, "No,
right.
no, read,
Yep.
learn how this
Yep.
works." Yeah.
Yeah. And in the 50s, which was when it was Eisenhower was president, I believe, that's when that happened. It's also when God got added to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, so I have some interesting information about this that I just learned from watching The Family, is that excuse me, in 1953, so this is an organization called the Fellowship, which is just a group of men trying to get power by
White
adding
men.
white men power. Thank you. White men power by utilizing religion. And they made a plan to take this globally, to
Mhm.
contact people in position of power. But in 1953, that was when Eisenhower was it was the very first time that the National Prayer Breakfast happened.
Mhm.
And um, it was in opposition to the Cold War and communism, and worried about communism. And so this group of people called the Family, designated a person to go talk to Eisenhower and convinced Eisenhower that Christianity would be a strong enough opposition to communism and would be able to
Yep.
control the people and calm them down and have a force to fight for. And so he agreed. And so that's how the National Prayer Breakfast started. So
Mhm.
it only makes sense. And that was interesting because he first said no because of separation of church and state,
Mhm.
uh, our very First Amendment. So, he originally said no and then said yeah because he wanted to use that power. It made sense. Isn't that crazy? That it
Mhm.
made sense. And so he went ahead and that. So I think that's why those things happen, is because of that whole
Mhm.
conversation with, I
Absolutely.
can't remember, was that Doug Coe that started that, or was that later when Doug Coe came in? I
No, I
can't
think
remember.
he was part of what started that. Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
so.
that's what I thought. Um, but yeah, so, that's a little crazy.
Yeah, and I have to admit, I didn't realize what the original Pledge of Allegiance said until I was doing some research. Saw it kind of mentioned in these documentaries, and then did a little research. So the original Pledge of Allegiance was just, "I pledge allegiance to my flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." Nothing about any religion at all.
Yeah.
No mention of it at all.
And if you ever thought that, you had this sneaky feeling that religion was really more about power or control, and you were told you were crazy. We're here to tell you you're wrong. You are not crazy. You are right. You're not crazy.
Right.
They're wrong, because we have found, now, not all religion. I'm not doing a mass slander here and saying, all religious people and all religions think this way. No, but there is a guiding force, a very strong force of people that want the power, white men that want to keep the power for themselves. And actually, then that's why this whole group started to begin with. Do you remember? Because you watched the family. It started in the
Yeah.
30s because 19 businessmen got together and they wanted to keep their wealth, because what was happening in the 30s? People were broke, right? This is after World War I. People were broke. They were desperate. There was a lot of, there was some famine. There wasn't a lot of money going around. People were working around the clock. And they revolted. They revolted against these business owners that were hoarding all of the money. So these 19 businessmen got together and said, no, we're going to keep our money. And so I don't think that we've got this plan in place. I've got a plan that we're going to be able to implement, but it's going to be way more powerful if we use God to explain this plan and tie it into God. I think we can make it work. And yeah, they crushed the labor revolt. They just crushed it because of God. God has been used over and over and over. Religion has been used over and over and over and over to control. And you may say, well, my church isn't like that. Yeah, but we don't hear from you. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, through that, they also recognized the power in incorporating God and the Bible to influence people as a moneymaker. I mean, look at how many, televangelists have gotten in trouble over the years for how they've spent all these millions of dollars that people have sent them.
Well, even outside of that, you go to, I just got back just a few weeks ago from Italy, and I'd gone to Rome, and one of the places I went to was Vatican City. And for the historical context, and what was absolutely blew my mind, just absolutely blew my mind, was that if you just take one of the buildings, the many, many buildings that I went through, the amount of wealth that is sitting in these buildings, gold, marble, just the paintings. The Catholics could eliminate poverty, at least in but seriously, I think they could eliminate poverty in the world. And it wouldn't take dismantling too many of the buildings to do so. And, I'm sure people will say, well, that's just sacrilegious. Well, I think it's horrific and inhumane to keep all manner of wealth. And I'm not attacking religion per se, just the wealth of it all.
Yeah.
And the disregard. Anyway, yeah, it's just a little insane to me. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I think, one thing, one of the specific documentaries that I went back through and watched a second time to sort of take some specific notes on was God and Country, which is on Freevee. So if you have a streaming opportunity, like whether it's Roku or, you have a smart TV or whatever, Freevee is something that anybody can watch for free. So it's out there. It's called God and Country. And it's about an hour and a half, I think. Really interesting to watch that and hear the various perspectives, because it's not just talking about a bunch of people that are judging people that are Christian nationalists. There are people who have been evangelical ministers and are now talking about, whoa, that's not the church I grew up in anymore. Like, it's different. We're not doing the same things. The same things aren't important as they used to be. There's a Catholic nun that they interview on there. There's all kinds of people that you might think would be on more of a side of defending these things, but they're going, yeah, this is not what we signed up for. So it's really interesting. And some of the other areas that you were just mentioned about kind of the different parts of our culture or society that they use to influence, there a lot of them that would be probably in that area of Christian nationalism or evangelical Christians are very restricted in terms of what they're allowed to watch or participate in terms of media. So I think what they said on there was the CBN, which is the Christian Broadcast Network.
Mhm.
I believe they said that's actually the largest media network in the world.
Mm.
And that they have all kind of censored, whitewashed kind of programming on there.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And so that's certainly when they're telling their people that's all you can watch, then they're not experiencing all the things that are out there, and anything that's not of that is judged.
Well, even for myself, I mean, I got very wrapped up in what 2020 and 60 Minutes referred to as a cult, which was the ICOC, the International Churches of Christ. And yeah, it was very, very strict. Now, we all thought, the congregation we all thought we were doing the Lord's work. And it was it really painted a bleak vision of the world and an us versus them mentality. I was even telling Jenny, I think on Monday, we used to have a joke in the church. Those of us that hadn't gotten completely indoctrinated yet, that happened a little bit later. So early on, when I was there, we had this joke, us that were young in the ministry, that go up to heaven and walk down. This guy dies and he goes to heaven, good guy, and St. Peter says, "Hey, let me walk you down and let me get you into your room." And I was walking down the hall, and the guy peeks into this one window, and he sees all these people just moaning and slapping themselves in the back with sticks, and he's like, "What is going on here?" And he's like, "Oh, that's the Catholics. They're working through their guilt." So walking a little bit further and looking through another window, and you see just snakes flying all over the place and people kind of dancing, and I was like, "Who's that?" I was like, "Oh, that's the Baptists. They're just a little." And you go a little bit further down, and he can't help but hear this loud, raucous craziness. And he goes down the hall. He's like, "What's down there?" And he goes, "Oh, that's the International Churches of Christ. They think they're the only ones up here." So, that's the church I went to. So if you were wondering if it truly was a cult, that should give you a pretty good answer. But yeah, we were absolutely told what movies not to watch. If something came out that was going to potentially pull us away from God, that we were forbidden to watch. We would get together on New Year's Eve and all hold hands together and pray, just in case God decided to destroy the earth on the new year. I don't know what that's all about, but
New Year surprise.
There were all kind of things like that. A lot of fear, a lot of putting different words around things. It's the way things are spoken about. So that if a newcomer comes in, you can get into a conversation with them. Like I could get into a conversation with somebody and know within 30 seconds whether you're a member or not, even if I've never met you, even if you're from a church out in Boston or a church in San Diego, because it's worldwide, ICOC.
Yep.
And I would instantly know. And you would also think I was weird, because I certainly thought all of them were weird when I got there. And then I just got hooked right on in and just
Mhm.
And now it's so funny because I can recognize it from a mile away, and I can hear the language, and I can hear the dog whistles.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a little, watching the family was like, ooh,
Yeah.
it really gave me the heebie-jeebies because it really reminded me of that. So much
Mhm.
about power, very little about love and grace, but
Right.
about power and dominance. And you need to do what I'm telling you to do so that we can evangelize the world, so we can bring more people to Jesus. It was very angry, very forceful,
Yep.
and controlling.
Yep. Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes from the God and Country documentary was, there was a black minister, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he said that Christian nationalists are so loud about the things that God said so little about, and so quiet about the things he said so much about. And I
Yeah,
thought,
that's
that's
brilliant.
like hitting the nail on the head on that one, because
So brilliant.
there's so little in the Bible or any religious text really, from that's not maybe somebody recently trying to influence you, about things like abortion, LGBTQ stuff, like all these things, people that are, well, actually, I've seen some memes. I think Myra even shared a couple that talked about, all these people that are going to, celebrate Christmas, which was basically about a couple that was down and out traveling to try to find a place to stay to better their lives, but they want to
In a
kick
foreign
everybody out
land.
of the country that are trying to find a place to stay to better their lives.
I
Like,
know.
hypocritical
Yeah,
much?
saw one, and I think she may have posted one of these where it said, trying to think like a national or a Christian nationalist, and removing all of the foreigners from my nativity scene.
Right.
And right, all I have left are two asses, and I can't remember what else it said, but
Right.
because of course all the foreigners are gone.
Right.
But anyway, but here's the interesting thing. And I've given a lot of thought to this, and I think I may have talked about this with you. I know I talked about it with Myra, which is why don't why don't we hear from the other churches? Why don't This is really their Jesus moment. Because right now the Pharisees are taking over.
Yeah.
The Pharisees are taking over, and they've taken religion into government so they can control people. They are the Pharisees. They are taking power and control and making money. They are the Pharisees. What did Jesus do to the Pharisees? Right? They proclaimed that they're Jesus and they're doing Jesus things, and this is, we're just being Jesus. And I'm probably shouldn't have done that, but it's all about, just doing this. It's all about Jesus, and yet they are not, and they can't even see it, because all they see is what I had gone through with ICOC, is the anger. I'm indignant. I am doing this for Jesus. It's almost like a crusade kind of mentality, where they can't even see anything else. And yet, why aren't the other churches taking this as their Jesus moment? Because this is the time.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus went in and flipped the tables on the Pharisees, because he was like, "Get out of my Father's house. You are not father." This is the Jesus moment. Every church that doesn't ascribe to this, instead of sitting back and going, "Oh, that's just hard. They shouldn't be doing that. That's not right. That's not right. That's not Jesus." Do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Flip the tables. You are in the right, and we will support you,
Mm-hmm.
because this is so important, and
Right.
we can't do it without you. Because if we're the only ones doing it, then it's easy to say, well, you heathens,
Right.
you just don't see. But if
Right.
other churches are coming in and saying, look how many more of us there are, you are not, rebuke them.
Yeah.
That's what Jesus did. Jesus rebuked them. Rebuke them. Be like Jesus. I implore you.
Yeah. Be like Christians. maybe
Yeah.
try that. Yeah. So I think that's a good segue into that video clip that we have, right? Of James.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, let me pull that. Or you have it already?
I got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, you
Here
got
we
it?
go.
Okay, great.
Christian nationalists are not interested in legislating Christian values. They are only interested in legislating Christian dominance. Christian nationalism is putting prayer in schools and taking free lunches out. Christian nationalism is teaching the Bible in schools, but refusing to give teachers a pay raise. Christian nationalism is forcing schools to post the Ten Commandments while nominating a candidate for president who has violated almost all of them. It is not about Jesus. It is about power.
Amen.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
something I can say amen to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I found going through the family. It was just a reconfirmation that this is all a power grab. And I read, and here's really interesting. I did not know, and I know you are familiar because you went through the family as well. You watched the family, but I did not know. I was not aware of how manipulative and conniving the National Prayer Breakfast was.
Mhm.
That really opened my eyes. It's really interesting, this whole web of, training, where they have the C Street house where they'll take congressmen and they can come and live, and it's only like $600 a month, which is unfair. That goes against, I can't remember what the rule is, but you aren't
Gifts
allowed to
that you
give gifts over
receive.
$100, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's certainly a gift. That's almost $2,000 over what it costs to get a place in Washington, D.C. So they have people from Congress that live there, and all under pretending it's a church, which has been challenged, and then going into Congress. And so you have all of these people that are in Congress that are a member of this fellowship, which is only white men and
White Christian men.
white Christian men. Thank you. And then these representatives who are supposed to be representing us are actually going on trips on our dime, and sometimes on the dime of the fellowship, or I think it's called the fellowship, the International Fellowship, the family. That they're going on either our dime or the dime of the family. And how they're going on our dime is what they're doing is going out on a trip to a country and doing things that are representative for the country, maybe going and meeting somebody. But then they're saying they're taking their hat off as if you could, right? As if I could take my hat off of being a wife or being a business owner just because I'm doing a podcast right now, right?
Mhm.
I'm not a business owner. Nope, I'm not. No, you
Mhm.
are. So
Right.
he's still a congressman, and these people are saying, no, I'm taking my congressman hat off and I'm just doing the work of Jesus. Well, that's not right. That's not separation of church and state. That's a huge,
Mhm.
huge problem. And
Mhm.
I just wanted to mention, so for example, just one representative, Representative Robert Adderholt, he visited 18 countries, right, for the family. At every single one of these, he did something for the family, for the fellowship, for this Christian nationalism. Albania, Austria, Bolivia, Bosnia, Herzegovina. I probably butchered that. I'm sorry. Bulgaria, Colombia, Croatia, Greece, Guatemala, Israel, Jordan, Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, Romania, Serbia, Sudan, Ukraine. That's one representative from our government. And the other representatives are like Senator Inhofe, Tom Coburn, Mike Doyle, Tony Hall, Frank Wolf, Randy Holtgen, and John Ensign, all making trips to other countries on behalf of and doing the bidding of the family.
It's like a mission trip.
It is. And yet we pay for them. It's just unbelievable. And then making friends with foreign leaders that we don't want to have a relationship with, for example, Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Russia, I had always been told, I grew up during the Cold War, Russia's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the family did is they went in and brought Christianity to Russia. So it went from a communist country to a Christian country. And now, and I didn't get the connection until I was watching the last episode of The Family, that's why Russia is being embraced because of Christianity. I have been trying to figure it out. How do you not get these are bad guys? How do you not care? They don't care because he's advancing what the Christian nationalists want.
Mm-hmm.
Just blew my mind.
Yeah, because didn't they mention that there was, to that prayer breakfast, there was a Russian...
2018, there were 40 people from Russia. Heads, I mean, these are powerful people from Russia. You can't buy a ticket to the prayer breakfast. You can't buy one. You have to be invited. That means 40 people from Russia were invited to the National Prayer Breakfast in 2018.
Which was when, let's see, who was president? Yeah.
Trump. Now, you say that right now to somebody who's MAGA or Christian nationalist, and they're like, they're advancing the word of God. We're allies. They're our friends. And the rest of us are going, what?
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking? And so we look at them like they're crazy, and they're looking at us like we're crazy.
Yeah. Why would you not want to spread the word of God to everyone? We shouldn't count them out. Yeah, whatever. Yep.
Watch The Family. I implore every Christian to watch The Family, because this is your Jesus moment. This is your Jesus moment to stand up and flip the Pharisee tables and get the Christian nationalists out of all of our business, and especially demeaning what you purport to stand up for.
Right.
And I know that that's like nonviolence and all the things, the good churches out there, you're doing all of the good things, except right now is your Jesus moment.
Agreed. Yeah. And just so people are aware, I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but it's worth mentioning again, you can find The Family on Netflix.
Yeah.
That's where that documentary is.
And I think you can probably find it a couple other places as well. I
probably
I think it's on Hulu. I think you can get it on Amazon now.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, some of them like cross do things. Like I got to the God and Country from Amazon, I think, but really it was on Freevee.
Like Freevee.
Yeah. So
and
so
that
you
may
have to have an Amazon account to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. We can post on our Facebook page if we find out that it's somewhere free for people to see. Everything we've mentioned so far, I think, would be subscription, but yeah, it's just so, and it's what, 3 or 4 episodes? It's like a docu-series.
Five episodes.
Five
Episodes. Yeah. It's so detailed. It's so good. And there's part of you, I'm not going to speak for you, speak for me. There was part of me that did not want to believe what I was watching. And one of the things that's so wonderful about watching this documentary is that it's full of evidence. It's not just this man's writing and this man's story from going in as a journalist into the family. It's not that. It is actually, there's actual evidence to show you, documents, there's video, there are people from the family willingly sitting there and telling you their side of it. But it is well worth your time and effort to watch it.
Yeah. And it's certainly not. A lot of people might say, "Oh, it's just Trump haters." No, it's not. There's only a few times when Trump even shows up in
Mm-mm.
that thing. So it's not just about him. They point out that
Oh,
the prayer breakfast happened through the Clinton administration, through the, and
every
that's
single president
yeah,
has been
since
at the prayer breakfast.
since Eisenhower. Yep.
Mhm.
And I think for me, that's one of the things I use to gauge how much I can trust a documentary and what they're saying. If it's just completely only slamming one particular thing and like they're looking for any excuse to bash a certain idea or whatever, it might be a little biased. But the ones that feel more authentic to me will demonstrate, hey, it's happening on this side too. But that, and it happened here as well. Or, it kind of just shows the origins of this thing. This is a separate thing from one party or another. This is a movement that's outside of parties, basically. And one of the things that it mentioned in God and Country is that this was directly from the guy who has been an evangelical minister. I can't remember if he quit or he's moved on and like retired. I can't remember what his situation is currently, but he was absolutely an evangelical minister within the last decade. And he said, we used to use Donald Trump as an example of the things not to do or not
Yeah,
to be.
eye of the needle, guys. Eye of the needles.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
And
lot of what
so,
that's referring to.
yeah. And he said, but he called a meeting, Donald Trump, the candidate, Donald Trump, back in 2016, called a meeting of evangelical leaders. And that guy that was talking was invited, but said, I'm not going to that. But he was getting text messages from his friends who went while the meeting was happening, like, ooh, this is our guy. He says he can make these things happen. We've been wanting to get rid of abortion for this long, and he said he can make it happen. We're going to go with him. And he's looking at these messages like, what? And all it took was him promising them the things that he promises everybody else and making it believable.
And you know what? Because
completely swung their ship over to him.
But because he did the one thing, he got them one step, two steps, really, if you look at the Supreme Court loading.
Absolutely.
Right. So he did two things that he promised,
Mhm.
two of the most important things to them, to the Christian Nationalists, because it gives them a foot in the door. So it's wow, it's just crazy. And it's hard for me to understand how people don't see that. And I have to believe that so many of us do, that so many more of us do, that we're just the ones that we're hearing from are just the loudest ones. And I still believe in us. I still believe that we have hope. I still believe that we can pull together and take care of this, but it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us jumping in there and doing something.
Yeah. Another thing that really stood out to me, and I think I've seen it other places too, but it was, as I was taking notes on God and Country, they talked about how, one of the things that made them even more interested in getting political was segregation, actually. When the public schools started to desegregate, Christian nationalists were like, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want our kids learning next to those kids and mingling with them. So we're going to create private schools for our kids to go to. And then the way that government became like, government doesn't have the same kind of oversight on a private school as it does a public school. But what they did, all they did was say, we'll take away your tax exempt status if you don't desegregate. Wah! Don't make us pay taxes. Like, that's all it took. And that's when they were like, we got to get our shit into the politics thing. Like, we can't let that shit continue to happen. Like, how nuts is that?
Yeah, it's all power. It's all a power grab. And it's happening right in front of us. And they've even said, those that are in power saying, if this should work, we should be able to do all of this bloodless, because they believe that they can keep us distracted, keep us fighting each other, so we don't pay attention to what's going on. I don't even know if this is on mainstream media, what's happening in North Carolina right now with this whole hurricane relief bill. I have no idea if that's even on mainstream media.
Yeah, and I don't watch national news and stuff like that anymore, so I can't tell you.
Yeah, I can't watch that stuff anymore. It's cool. But I have few sources, and that might be interesting. If with that, I'm thinking that may be interesting for us to put up some resources. We could do a post that puts up the resources, some of the places where we get our news from, and maybe open it up to see if there's other places that people recommend. And then if there's something that we see in there that we're like, there's a problem, like that one news source that you were looking at,
1440. Yep.
1440, and it turns out might not want to get your news from them.
Yeah.
Because it would appear that they could be, maybe, possibly, biased. Because there's no one of color. Well, let's just say there's nobody but white people. There's nobody but white people that's on their staff.
Right.
And so that.
And it's quite
is
possible
concerning.
that they are of the Christian nationalist bent. I have no proof of that.
No proof.
But yeah.
Yeah. The only thing we know is that the owner of it is actually an ex
Republican state senator.
Republican state senator. So just thinking 1440 may not be where you want to be.
Yeah.
So this could get really, really lengthy, and we're getting to the end of our time. So let's go to how about some things that you can do? I know one of the things is getting this book. I don't sell it. I just think it's a really good idea to get this book, On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century, about how to stand up and stand out, take care of yourself, take care of your neighbors, and how to move forward with that. I know in our list, Jenny and I had written a list that we'll put up as well, but we can run over the highlights of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of these come directly from that book that you just mentioned, the On Tyranny book. It has some good lessons in there of how to try to avoid becoming a
yeah, we might want to just skip. Why don't we just skip down to that part, because we decided we were going to share some from that. So there's 20 lessons, but just here's a few of them. Why don't we just take opposite? I'll take one, you take one. So do not obey in advance. Okay. We already saw that with John and Mika, right?
Joe and Mika,
Joe and Mika, thank you. Where they went in and met with Trump. And so that's yeah, exactly, kissing the ring. On the other hand, we had one of the contributors to the LA Times, who had been a contributor for over 15 years, who stepped down and said he doesn't want to have anything to do with LA Times, because the LA Times, not only did they choose not go for or validate, what is it called? Put up, support. Not only did they not support a candidate for the first time, that they also are now trying to push forward a Christian nationalist right-wing agenda with their writers. And so he's like, I have to have integrity.
Yeah.
So do not obey in advance. There's an example of how to not obey. It's just a temptation to conform to authoritarian pressures. It's a good thing.
Yep. Another one is defend institutions. Protect institutions like the judiciary, free press, and independent organizations. And you know what? That's one of those things, like Planned Parenthood is one of those organizations that should be protected, should not be dismantled because of all this rigmarole.
The ACLU, right now they're trying to get rid of the ACLU. So we're not saying, go out and defend all of them. You can't. You don't have the time. But pick something that's important to you and support them. And that could be sharing their news, sharing their information, but support them. You want to take the next one? I mean, we have 20, but we're not going to do all of them. We're cherry picking here.
Sure. Yeah. Take responsibility for the face of the world. That includes things like speaking out against symbols of hate and racism. And I would say not just symbols, but words, phrases that people may just take for granted, but there's a meaning to them. It lands differently for some people. Point that out. Help to stop that.
Yeah, I think part of that is, making sure that you're spending money in places where they support rights and not spending money in places where they don't support rights. For example, Walmart. Walmart just took away all their DEI regulations. I know there are a lot of Black people right now that aren't going to Walmart, and it's probably a really good idea not to go to Walmart. They overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump. Stand out. And I know that can be scary. Stand out, especially when their goal is to make you fearful right now. Their goal is to make you fearful. So sometimes the greatest act of activism can be just be standing out, being great, being courageous, and setting an example that inspires others to resist oppression. I just had a phone call earlier this week with somebody that's interested in our group. And she said that she went into one of her networking groups. It was, wow, inspirational. She went into one of her networking groups and she stood up and she said, I am leaving this group. In a networking group, you're supposed to be able to share leads with each other. I not only don't want yours, I don't want to give you my people because I don't like at least half of you in here. Because you do not support my rights while you sit here and hand me leads and ask for mine. Because they voted for Trump. And she walked away. And somebody later called her up and said, you were kidding, right? I mean, you still want my leads. And she said, no. She said her and her husband had a really long talk about, her integrity in her business. And could she do that? Could she, with a clear conscience, take their leads and give them leads? She decided she couldn't. Yep. That's standing out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another thing that's important about this one is that representation is important. Yeah. So even if what you're doing doesn't seem like it's, earth shattering or whatever, when you do something and someone else sees you doing it, it helps them to know that, oh, well, maybe I can stand up and do that too.
The ripple effect.
Yep.
That just to expand on that for just a moment, Banner? Oh, that's Hulk.
That's who we need.
The guy that broke the 4-minute mile.
I don't remember that. I had no idea that's where you were going.
The guy that broke listen to me for a second. The guy that broke the 4-minute mile, people said it was impossible. You cannot run a mile faster than 4 minutes. Everybody was told it was impossible. And then one day, this guy that I can't think of the name of,
Roger Bannister. I looked it up for you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Roger Bannister. You see why I got confused. So Roger Bannister, he broke it. He broke the 4-minute mile. And then suddenly there were people who are like, oh, it's possible? And then people started breaking it. One after the other, after the other, after the other,
Yep.
after the other. And now I think it's even like a standard, for your top athlete. I mean, it's just that's like a nothing. 4-minute mile.
Yeah. I doubt that anyone in the Olympic finals for the mile was over 4 minutes.
No, it's like a nothing now.
And the same kind of thing probably with like 100 meter dash. Probably for years, I don't think anybody thought it could be done in less than 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. And absolutely, there's several people that have done it in less than 10 seconds now.
So what you believe is what's going to happen. So it's really important that we set these examples, because we set these examples, somebody else says, oh, That's how you do it. Or, oh gosh, that gave me courage, or you're inspiring. And there's this ripple effect because then somebody else does it, and somebody else does it, and somebody else does it. And then we're happy and joyful again. All right. What's our next one?
The next one is make eye contact and small talk. And one of the things that I think is interesting or important about this is that you're more likely, I think, to get through to someone as part of small talk and really finding out kind of where they're coming from versus the shouting back and forth, like on social media, you know, like, you're this and no, you're that. No, you know, that's not going to get you anywhere. If you're just having like, whether it's one-on-one or just a small group or something like that, just talking about things that everybody maybe at first agrees on, and then sort of venturing into some of the things that are a little more dicey. And I'll tell you, this actually was a pleasant surprise for me last summer, not this past summer, but the summer before, talking to a family member who I knew was traditionally voting on the other side of things from me, and had a situation where we were going to be alone, just the two of us talking for a while. And I thought, oh, this could get interesting and uncomfortable pretty quick. But I swear, as we were just talking person to person, I was amazed at how much we actually agreed on several things. And it was only when he was like, well, you know, that Tucker Carlson is like my hero. And I'm like, okay, well, now's where we probably want to stop the small talk. Because I don't know, if you think he's your hero, I don't think I can do much about that. But you know, it really just one-on-one small talk kind of conversation, you really find out where people actually are versus just the talking points, the shouting of.
Well, and I think then you surprise people as well, and we can surprise each other, which you just said. But the other thing is it can also keep you safe. There's the one aspect of it is, you know, knowing your community, building your community, being in contact. We are a social animal. But the other side of it is, what if you are potentially being targeted? It's actually, it seems backwards, especially as women who are taught to shrink, to not make themselves a target, when that's actually the opposite of what you need to do. If you actually look at a person, a lot of times you can get them to stop. I have example after example. Maybe we need to start sharing those on our page. I have example after example of people who have stopped something from potentially happening, or stopped a bully, or stopped whatever, from stopping what they're doing and turning and looking and facing them. And just looking at them in the eye. And so this can actually help you as well. You have to judge the safetiness with your energy. But there are cases, this just happened to me. I think I've mentioned this before on this show, where I have my hair cut a little bit shorter right now. I can't get my hair cut again until January. So she had to cut it way shorter this time. And I look, not right now, I look pretty good right now, but there are times I look a lot like my dad. And if I'm in a sweater or sweatshirt and jeans, I can look trans. And where people are trying to guess, are you a male? Are you a female? And then, you know, I come out of the female restroom, they're like, are you? You know, and I
be upset that you were just in there.
Right. And I had 3 men. I was out in this, Myra and I had gone out. Oh, we had gone to Charlotte, and we had stopped at a gas station somewhere, backwoods country, North Carolina. And we were in a relatively safe place. I told Myra, I want to go someplace where there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people. And I walked in, and I had this guy just looking at me, and I just looked back, and he immediately like averted his eyes. So don't let them intimidate you is what I'm trying to say. And I know part of my bravery came from the fact that I'm not trans, and for most of my life I was treated with the privilege of being a white woman. For most of my life I had that. And So I guess that's probably where part of my bravery comes from, because I'm like, stop, like just
Yeah.
stop, like, and
Right.
I'm a mom, and now I have a grandbaby, so I'm like, just stop, stop.
Right.
And it worked. Would it work for everybody? No, not necessarily. And again, you have to know your situation. I was in a very safe environment, in broad daylight, lights all around, and I was taller than all of them. I get a little privilege with height.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we also have listen for dangerous words. Be alert to language that normalizes hate, discrimination, or authoritarianism. And this is what we are doing right now. I think this is why this is such a watershed moment, going and fighting this legislation in North Carolina right now, because it is dangerous. This is very dangerous. They could use this as in a very dangerous way, and definitely normalize hate. And that could be with Black people, that could be with the queer community, that could be with disabled. We saw what Trump did before, and the more he does things like that, it creates its own ripple effect.
Yep.
So our ripples have to be louder. Ripples have to be louder. If anything else you want to add about that one, or you would just go to the next one?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think if you just hear people using terminology, or whether you hear it or see it, if it's a post or something like that, just sort of pointing out, maybe that's not the best way to say that, or that may have a little more meaning to people than what you realize. Can you find a different way of saying something like that in the future? And it depends on the situation, whether you kind of call them out in public, or you just sort of like, privately point it out to them so that they can change things in the future. But things like that, I think, are important. And again, it's one of those lead by example, be the representation of how more healthy language is happening, and more people, I think, will follow.
Absolutely. And the last one, this has actually been a theme throughout this entire last section, which is be as courageous as you can. Be as courageous as you can. And we know that not everybody is going to have the same amount of courage. Not everybody is meant to do the same things.
Right.
There are a lot of ways that you can participate in a much more quiet way. There are phone calls you can make. There are letters you can send. There are so many different ways to be active in this. Resist tyranny in ways that reflect your abilities and values. Yeah, exactly what I just said. So just because other people are running and going to a let's say it's a march, or there's going to be a march in January 18th up in DC. This week in North Carolina, on this Wednesday, there's going to be we're all going to go to the Capitol to try and stop what has happened, get them to reverse it. So just because there are people doing that doesn't mean there aren't things that you can do right where you are.
Yeah.
There are things you can do. You don't have to do all the big active things, and you can still participate in saving our democracy.
Yeah. And I think a couple of other good examples of the election may have gone a different way than we wanted it to, but there's already been a couple of situations where some of his appointments have been changed because they were so ridiculously unqualified, and obviously would be put in a position to only create the power that he's promised to certain evangelical leaders. Like there's at least two I can think of that have already been changed, right?
And somebody just stepped down this morning or yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Somebody else just stepped down. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, so it's not too late to still have those conversations about, like, what the heck, people? Is this really what we want? I mean, we still have some pull. We still have some influence in these things. So that's and that, wasn't like everybody got up and marched to Washington to make those things happen. All kinds of ways to share things that you see, on social media or something. And the more people that see that, they go, oh, Jesus, why? No, that's not what we want. Just spreading the word.
Yeah.
And speaking up about it.
Oh, and there's a way we can do this. I just know it. There's so many more of us. They just are making big noise to make us think that we are not, and saying that they're a landslide victory. And no, there's more of us that didn't want this to happen than wanted it to happen, including people that voted for third party.
Yeah.
We certainly didn't want this to happen either.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and it's an interesting situation because another documentary that I think is important, but didn't really have a lot specifically about Christian nationalism. I think it'll come up either next week or maybe in some other leashes that we talk about other weeks.
Mhm.
But it's a documentary called Thrive, and there's now one called Thrive 2. I watched that well over a decade ago, and I remember it sort of opening my eyes to, holy crap, there's so much going on behind the scenes of our government that, what they say, on the news about, oh, this senator did this. No, there's people pulling the strings behind the scenes. So it really opened my eyes to that kind of thing. And I certainly had an intention or a sense of, I'm not going to vote for either of those parties. If they're both bought and paid for by whoever, is pulling the strings behind the thing, I'm going to vote for somebody that's independent from that. But understanding, kind of the next level of understanding that is voting in one election to try to get someone that's like third party, for example, into power is not going to change that structure. So while I understand the intention of it, that's not how it starts.
Yeah. It's naive. It's naive. Does it need to change? Does it need to change? Yes, it needs to change.
Yeah.
But voting for a third party, unless you have half the nation involved in that, it's just not gonna work.
Yeah.
And all it does is take votes away from the candidate that isn't going to strip you of your rights, which is what they did.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway,
the only other thing I want to add before we kind of wrap up,
please,
was one other thing that, since we didn't have that video of the girl making the connections between the current situation here.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it and pull it up onto our Unleashed page.
Yeah, but one thing that came out of the God and Country documentary, a note that I had, was that same evangelical minister that was interviewed on that mentioned that it was years of him being an evangelical minister before he realized that the set of books, it's a theological dictionary or something like that, that they were supposed to always reference in terms of when they were creating their talks for their congregation, was actually written by somebody, G. Kittle, who, as it turns out, was Hitler's like theological person, that came up with the justification for the whole, it's
slaughtering
crazy.
of the
He's like, I cannot believe that that's what we were referencing. That's what we were told to reference, is the writings of this guy who was able to justify, genocide. Like, what the hell?
The Bible used to be used to justify hangings of Black people.
Yep. Yeah, but he had no clue, and he was deeply entrenched in it, and still had no idea that those things were written by somebody that also could write that, or could influence that. So it's just a lot of, you got to dig down deeper than surface level and figure out what's really going on. Read between the lines and under the lines and all that.
Yes, and we need to take part in our democracy, because it is going to go away unless we fight for it. So, and I'm going to say this really quick so that we can remember to talk about this again, or actually, which is, and it's gone again. Whatever you just said. Can you please just say what you said again?
You think I can remember that? No. You were saying we need to be more active in our democracy. I said read between the lines, read under the lines.
Yeah, I'm going to have to watch this again. All right. I don't know what's wrong with me. All right. Next week's episode, I hope you've enjoyed today. Next week's episode is the leash of corporatocracy. And we are going to, in case you want to do some work in advance, we're going to be watching Thrive, and there's another show called Buy Now.
Yep.
And can't remember where Buy Now is.
I believe that's Netflix.
Okay.
And I can tell you the Thrive thing is not
It's its
released
own,
publicly.
it's its own website. Yeah, it's its own
Yes,
website.
and I did put it on here. Hold on, let me put it up. It is at freetothrive.com.
Awesome.
You can get to both movies from that website.
So next week we'll be talking about the Leash of Corporatocracy. I think it's coming at a great time. And if you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, follow, share, let your friends know. And if you have a topic, question, or want to be a guest, please go to our website at unleashedafpodcast.com. Visit www.JDD. What would Jenny and Deidre do? We'd love to hear from you.
That's right.
And until next time, get unleashed AF. All right. Take care.
I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck.